Here's everything you need to erase my ex-wife from business.
The saliva touched my cheek with the weight of 17 years of marriage. Sign it, Ronnie said, sliding the paper across the conference table. Her manicured finger tapped the salary reduction clause. 90% cut, effective immediately. Tyler Blake leaned back in his chair, that smirk playing on his 22-year-old face. The intern who'd been warming my wife's bed for 3 months now had front-row seats to my humiliation. I need 20 hours, I said, wiping her spit off my face with the back of my hand. You need to remember who runs this company, Ronnie snapped. I built this place from nothing. You're just operations. Just operations. 17 years of pulling her firm out of bankruptcy twice, landing the biggest clients, fixing her mistakes. Just operations. The marketing team sat frozen around the conference table. Sarah from accounting stared at her laptop. Jim from creative studied his coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. 20 hours, I repeated, standing up. Then we'll talk. Tyler finally spoke up. Maybe he didn't hear you right, babe. 90%. That's like minimum wage, right? Babe. In front of the entire senior staff. I looked at my wife. Really looked at her. The woman I'd supported through business school, helped launch her first campaign, stood by during every crisis. She was glowing. Actually glowing with the thrill of destroying me in public. I heard perfectly, I said. 20 hours. I walked out of that conference room with their laughter following me down the hall. Harvey Kent answered on the first ring. Evan Miles. Wasn't expecting to hear from you. I sat in my car outside a Starbucks, engine running, air conditioning fighting the August heat. Your offer from last year, is it still good? Which offer? I've made you several. The one where you said you'd been waiting for an inside man at Sterling Marketing. Long pause. Harvey Kent ran Apex Global, our biggest competitor. Built like a linebacker, sharp as a surgeon's blade, and ruthless enough to poach our clients with surgical precision. What changed your mind? He asked. My wife just spat on me in front of her boyfriend and the entire senior staff. Then she cut my salary to minimum wage. Jesus, she really did that? In writing. Signed and witnessed. Another pause. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. What do you want in return? Harvey asked. I want her destroyed before the company. Meaning? Meaning I want Veronica Miles blacklisted from this industry before Apex absorbs Sterling Marketing. I want her boyfriend fired. I want them both to understand exactly what they threw away. Harvey laughed, but it wasn't cruel. It was appreciative. How much access do you have? Complete financial records, client contracts, personnel files, strategic plans. I've been running operations for 17 years. And you're willing to burn it all down? Harvey, I said, watching a young couple walk past my car, holding hands, looking happy. I built most of what you'll be buying. I know every weakness, every vulnerability, every single thing that keeps this place running. Yes, I'm willing to burn it down. 24 hours, he said. I'll have a contract ready. Make it 48. I need to play the wounded husband for a bit longer. I signed the salary reduction papers the next morning. Ronnie looked genuinely surprised. She'd probably expected me to storm out, file for divorce, make threats. Instead, I sat across from her desk and put my signature on the line. Smart choice, she said. Maybe now you'll remember your place. Tyler lounged on her office couch, scrolling through his phone. Kid probably didn't even know what the company did beyond paying his internship stipend. I appreciate the opportunity to continue contributing, I said. This is still my wife's company. My commitment hasn't changed. The words tasted like ash, but they had the desired effect. Ronnie relaxed, leaned back in her chair. She'd expected a fight. Compliance confused her. Good. We have the Morrison Industries pitch next week. I trust you'll put together something competitive. Morrison Industries, $12 million account, our biggest potential client this year. Of course. I'll start immediately. That afternoon, I copied every file related to the Morrison pitch onto a secure drive. Cost breakdowns, creative concepts, strategic positioning, pricing models, everything. Then I called Harvey Kent. Morrison Industries, I said. They're deciding between us and you next Friday. We're not even in the running for Morrison. You are now. I'm sending you our complete proposal. Undercut our pricing by 8% and emphasize supply chain reliability. That's their biggest concern. This really is happening, Harvey said. It's already happened. They just don't know it yet. The Morrison Industries decision came on a Tuesday. I watched Ronnie take the call from my desk outside her office. Through the glass, I saw her face go from confident to confused to furious in about 30 seconds. She slammed the phone down and stormed out. They went with Apex, she announced to the bullpen. Apparently, Apex's proposal was exactly what they were looking for. Better pricing, better strategy, better everything. Tyler looked up from his computer. But didn't you say we had that account locked up? I said we were competitive. Ronnie's voice had an edge now. Markets change. Competitors adapt. She looked at me. Evan, I want a full analysis of how they beat us. I want to know where our intelligence failed. I'll start immediately, I said. That afternoon, I began my analysis. Not of how Apex beat us, but of how to make it happen again. And again, and again. The key was patience. Random disasters looked suspicious. But a steady decline, a series of competitive losses, missed opportunities, strategic errors that could be explained by market forces. That looked like incompetent leadership. I started with the small accounts. The ones Ronnie wouldn't notice immediately. Peterson and Associates lost to Apex after their pricing somehow matched our internal quotes exactly. Riverside Construction chose Apex when their representative mentioned solutions to problems they'd never told us about. Citibank's regional campaign awarded to Apex after our creative brief mysteriously appeared in their presentation. By Thursday, we'd lost 6 accounts in 2 weeks. Not enormous accounts, but steady revenue. The kind of bleeding that made board members ask uncomfortable questions. Ronnie called an all-hands meeting. We're facing increased competitive pressure, she said. Some of you might be feeling discouraged by recent losses. That's natural, but Sterling Marketing has weathered storms before. She looked radiant up there, commanding the room. Tyler sat in the front row, giving her encouraging nods like a trained SEAL. We're going to tighten our processes, improve our security, and we're going to win. The applause was polite, but scattered. I clapped too, just loud enough to blend in. After the meeting, Sarah from accounting approached my desk. Evan, can I ask you something? Of course. Is it true that Apex is hiring? I wouldn't know. Why do you ask? My cousin works there. She says they're expanding rapidly. Growing their client base. Good benefits, competitive pay. I kept my face neutral. Are you thinking of making a change? Maybe. This place feels unstable lately, like we're always one disaster away from layoffs. I understand the concern, but you've built good relationships here. Sometimes loyalty pays off in the long run. She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Sarah had been with the company for 8 years. Reliable, competent, completely invisible to Ronnie's ego-driven management style. That evening, I called Harvey Kent. I need you to make an offer to Sarah Mitchell in accounting, market rate plus 20%. She's good, and she's wavering. Just accounting? For now, too many departures too quickly looks suspicious. But Sarah knows our financial systems, our client billing cycles, our cash flow patterns. She'll be useful. And when she leaves, it'll create a small crisis. Ronnie will have to promote someone or hire externally. Either way, it disrupts operations and makes her look reactive instead of strategic. Harvey was quiet for a moment. You really are going to burn it all down, aren't you? One brick at a time. Sarah gave her notice on a Monday morning. I was in the break room when I heard Ronnie shouting in her office. Through the thin walls, her voice carried clearly. What do you mean, better opportunity? I gave you a career here. 20 minutes later, Sarah emerged from the office looking shaken but determined. Ronnie followed her out, Tyler trailing behind like an anxious puppy. This is exactly the kind of disloyalty that's been poisoning this company, Ronnie announced to the office. Some people forget who gave them their start. Sarah packed her desk in silence while the rest of the staff pretended to work. The tension was thick enough to cut. After Sarah left, Ronnie called me into her office. I need you to take over her responsibilities until we can hire a replacement. I'm not qualified to handle accounting. Figure it out. Your operations. Operations means making things work. I spent the next 3 days deliberately screwing up Sarah's systems. Nothing illegal, nothing that couldn't be explained as learning curve mistakes, but payroll was delayed by 2 days. A client payment got lost in the system for a week. Expense reports backed up, small problems. the kind that made people question leadership competence. On Thursday, Tyler made his first real mistake. I was walking past Ronnie's office when I heard him on the phone. The door was slightly open, and his voice carried, "No, baby, she has no idea we're planning Vegas. Yeah, we can use the company card for the hotel. She signs off on all my expenses without looking. Company card for personal trips, with audio evidence." I quietly activated my phone's recording app and positioned myself where I could capture both sides of the conversation. Tyler was talking to someone named Ashley, apparently a friend from college. "The old guy she's married to is such a loser," Tyler continued. "She cut his salary to basically nothing last month. You should have seen him just take it like a little puppy. No wonder she needed a real man." The conversation continued for 15 minutes. Tyler discussing company finances, bragging about his relationship with the CEO, making crude jokes about me, and explicitly planning to use company funds for personal entertainment. That evening, I edited the recording to include only the most damaging parts. The Vegas trip planning, the company card admission, the crude comments about his relationship with Ronnie. Then I created an anonymous email account and sent the recording to 3 board members. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. I arrived early, as always, and was setting up the conference room when Ronnie walked in with Tyler. She looked furious. He looked confused and slightly sick. "Evan," she said, "I need you to take notes during this meeting." Of course. The board filed in over the next few minutes. 5 external members, all successful business people who'd invested in Sterling Marketing during its early expansion. They looked serious. Richard Caldwell, the board chairman, called the meeting to order. "We're here to discuss allegations of financial impropriety and inappropriate conduct," he said. "Specifically, recordings that suggest company funds have been used for personal entertainment and that intimate relationships within the company may be affecting professional judgment." Tyler shifted in his seat. Ronnie's jaw was clenched so tight I thought she might crack a tooth. "I'd like to hear these recordings," Ronnie said. Caldwell played the audio. Tyler's voice filled the room, bragging about using the company card, calling me a loser, discussing his sexual relationship with the CEO in crude detail. The silence afterward was deafening. "Tyler," Caldwell said, "is this your voice on the recording?" Yes, but it was taken out of context. I was just joking around with a friend." "Joking about using company funds for personal travel?" Tyler looked at Ronnie for support. She was staring at the table, her face flushed with rage and embarrassment. "The Vegas trip hasn't happened yet," Tyler said. "Nothing was actually charged to the company. But you intended to charge personal expenses to the company?" Maybe I misspoke. I was just trying to impress my friend." Board member Patricia Wong leaned forward. "Miss Miles, what's your response to these allegations?" Ronnie finally looked up. "Tyler's personal conduct reflects poorly on this company. However, no company funds have actually been misused. This appears to be an attempt to damage our reputation using private conversations taken out of context." "What about the intimate relationship between you and Mr. Blake?" Caldwell asked. "My personal relationships are not the board's concern unless they affect company performance. A CEO having an intimate relationship with a subordinate creates liability issues," Wong said. "Sexual maltreat claims, favoritism accusations, hostile work environment complaints, it absolutely affects company performance." The meeting continued for 2 hours. Tyler was placed on immediate suspension pending a full investigation. Ronnie was formally reprimanded and required to implement new policies regarding workplace relationships. I took detailed notes throughout, maintaining my professional demeanor while internally celebrating each devastating revelation. As the board members filed out, Ronnie cornered me. "Did you record Tyler's conversation?" "No. Why would I do that?" "Someone did. Someone wanted to hurt this company. Maybe someone wanted to protect it." She stared at me for a long moment. "You signed that salary reduction without a fight. You've been unusually cooperative lately. Why?" "Because this is still my wife's company. I believe in what we're building here." The lie came easily now. Practice made perfect. The story broke on Monday morning. Local business reporter Janet Pierce had somehow obtained details about Tyler's suspension and the board investigation. Her article in the Business Journal was professionally written but devastating. Sterling Marketing CEO under fire for relationship with intern. The piece quoted anonymous sources within the company describing a pattern of inappropriate conduct and questions about professional judgment. It mentioned the salary reduction of a longtime senior employee and suggested that company morale was at an all-time low. Tyler's suspension was characterized as the latest in a series of setbacks for the once promising marketing firm. By Tuesday morning, the story had been picked up by 3 other local outlets and 2 industry publications. Ronnie was in damage control mode, scheduling interviews and issuing statements, but every public appearance seemed to make things worse. The relationship is completely professional, she told Channel 7 News. Any suggestion otherwise is simply gossip. But Tyler had already been suspended for professional misconduct, making her denial look either dishonest or out of touch. The real damage came from the client calls. Morrison Industries called to express concern about stability and professional standards. 2 other major clients scheduled check-in meetings to discuss their ongoing contracts. 3 prospects postponed pitch meetings indefinitely. The financial impact was immediate and measurable, but the reputational damage was even worse. Sterling Marketing was becoming known as that company with the CEO scandal. I watched it all unfold from my desk, processing the daily crises, maintaining my professional demeanor, and quietly documenting everything for Harvey Kent. On Wednesday, Tyler came to the office to clean out his desk. The suspension had become a termination, effective immediately. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in a week. The cocky swagger was gone, replaced by hollow-eyed desperation. "Evan," he said, stopping by my desk. "I'm sorry about what I said on that recording. I was just talking stupid, trying to impress someone." "I appreciate that, Tyler. Could you put in a good word for me with Ronnie? Maybe this could all be worked out?" I looked at this kid who'd been so eager to watch my humiliation, who'd smirked while his girlfriend spat on me, who'd called me a loser to his friends. "I think you need to focus on your next opportunity," I said. "This situation has probably run its course." He nodded miserably and continued packing his personal items into a cardboard box. That afternoon, I called Harvey Kent. "Tyler Blake just got terminated. He's going to be looking for work, probably desperate enough to take any offer. He might be useful as a source of information about Ronnie's plans and state of mind. You want us to hire him? God, no. But maybe you could interview him. Get him talking. People say a lot when they're angry and desperate." "What kind of things?" "The kind of things that might end up in industry publications." Background quotes from former Sterling Marketing employees about internal culture, management style, professional standards. Harvey was quiet for a moment. "You really don't do anything by accident, do you? Accidents are inefficient. Our biggest project of the year was the Riverside Development Campaign. 6 months of work. Creative concepts, media strategy, brand positioning, launch timeline. Everything designed to introduce their new luxury residential complex to the Denver market. The presentation was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Riverside's executive team would fly in from Chicago to see our recommendation before signing the final contract. On Wednesday afternoon, Harvey Kent called. "We need to talk, in person." We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from both our offices. "Apex just landed the Riverside Development account," Harvey said. I nearly dropped my coffee. "What? The presentation isn't until tomorrow. They called us yesterday, said they'd decided to explore other options. We presented this morning." "How is that possible?" Harvey pulled out his tablet and showed me Apex's campaign materials. They were identical to ours. Not similar, identical. Same creative concepts, same taglines, same media strategy, same launch timeline. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "Someone copied your entire presentation and gave it to us," Harvey said. "We assumed it was you." "It wasn't me. This is—" I stopped, my mind racing. "This is corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property. This could destroy both companies." Harvey leaned forward. "Evan, I need you to be straight with me. Did you give us this material?" "No. I've been feeding you strategic intelligence, client information, competitive insights, but I've never stolen creative work. That crosses a line I won't cross." "Then who did?" I thought about it. Who had access to the Riverside materials? The creative team, obviously. Ronnie, Tyler, until last week. A few senior staff members. "I need to get back to the office," I said. This is bigger than our arrangement. But as I drove back to Sterling Marketing, a different possibility occurred to me. What if this wasn't about Apex at all? What if someone else had copied our presentation and given it to Apex, knowing that the resulting scandal would destroy both companies' reputations? What if someone wanted both Sterling Marketing and Apex to look like unethical thieves? That afternoon, I quietly reviewed our server logs. Someone had accessed the Riverside files at 11:47 p.m. on Monday night. The access was logged to my credentials, but I'd been home Monday night, in bed with a book. Someone had used my login information to steal our own presentation materials. I called Harvey immediately. "We've been set up," I said. Someone used my credentials to copy the presentation, then fed it to Apex, knowing that Riverside would see identical campaigns and conclude that one of us stole from the other. Who would do that? Someone who wants both companies to lose the account. Someone who benefits from chaos in the Denver marketing industry. The answer came to me even as I said it. Denver had 3 major marketing firms: Sterling, Apex, and Pinnacle Creative. If Sterling and Apex destroyed each other's reputations fighting over stolen intellectual property, Pinnacle would inherit both client bases, but proving it would be nearly impossible. And in the meantime, both companies would be facing legal challenges, client defections, and public relations disasters. "What do we do?" Harvey asked. "We tell the truth, all of it, to everyone." I called an emergency meeting for Friday morning. Not just Sterling marketing staff, but also Harvey Kent and 2 representatives from Apex Global. I invited Riverside Development's executives to attend by video conference. And I made sure Janet Pierce from the Business Journal was there to document everything. Ronnie was furious when she saw the setup. "What the hell is this, Evan?" "This is damage control," I said. "For all of us." I started with the evidence. Server logs showing my credentials being used while I was at home. Security footage from the office building showing an unknown person entering our floor late Monday night. Phone records showing calls between that person and Pinnacle Creative. "Someone has been playing us against each other," I explained. "They stole our presentation materials, gave them to Apex, then made sure Riverside knew about the identical campaigns. The goal was to make both companies look like thieves and liars." Harvey Kent nodded. "We received the materials through an anonymous email account. We assumed they came from a Sterling employee who wanted to help us compete more effectively." "But you didn't think to verify the source?" Ronnie demanded. "We thought the source was your husband," Harvey said quietly. The room went silent. "Evan has been feeding us strategic intelligence for 6 weeks, Harvey continued. "Client information, competitive insights, internal problems. We assumed the presentation materials were part of that arrangement." All eyes turned to me. Ronnie's face was a mask of fury and betrayal. "Is that true?" she asked. "Yes. You've been sabotaging my company? I've been responding to being spat on and humiliated in front of your boyfriend and our entire staff. You cut my salary by 90% to impress a 22-year-old intern. You made it clear that my 17 years of contribution meant nothing to you." The Riverside executives watched this unfold through the video conference, their expressions unreadable. "But I didn't steal the creative work," I continued. "That crossed a line I wouldn't cross. Someone else did that. Someone who wanted both companies to destroy each other." Over the next hour, we pieced together the evidence. The anonymous email account traced to a public computer at the downtown library. Security footage showing someone entering our building using a stolen access card. Financial records showing that Pinnacle Creative had been aggressively pursuing both Sterling and Apex's client base. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that we'd all been manipulated, but the damage was already done. Riverside Development terminated both companies and hired Pinnacle Creative to handle their campaign. 3 other clients expressed concerns about security and professionalism. Industry publications ran stories about espionage and competitive corruption in the Denver marketing scene. As everyone filed out of the conference room, Ronnie cornered me. "You destroyed us," she said. I responded to being destroyed. "There's a difference. 17 years, Evan. 17 years, and you threw it all away for revenge." "I threw it away? You're the one who spat on me. You're the one who cut my salary to minimum wage. You're the one who humiliated me to impress your boy toy. So you decided to burn down everything we built together?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd married, supported, believed in for almost 2 decades. "We didn't build this together, Ronnie. You made that very clear." I was just operations. Just the guy who fixed your mistakes and made your ideas work. Just the husband who got in the way of your real relationship. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked my opinion about anything? When was the last time you treated me like a partner instead of an employee? She had no answer for that. I'm filing for divorce, she said finally. I already filed. Last week. You'll be served Monday. Sterling Marketing lasted 6 more weeks. The Pinnacle creative scandal had done massive damage, but the internal bleeding was worse. 3 more key employees left for Apex. 2 major clients terminated their contracts early. A banking review flagged several accounting irregularities from the period after Sarah's departure. The board called an emergency meeting in late September. I sat in the conference room where this all began, taking notes as the board voted to remove Ronnie as CEO and put the company up for sale. She fought it, of course. Argued that the problems were temporary, that she could restore stability, that selling was premature. But the numbers didn't lie. Revenue was down 60% from the previous year. Client retention was at historic lows. Employee morale surveys showed widespread dissatisfaction with leadership. The company needs a fresh start, board chairman Richard Caldwell said. New leadership, new direction, new culture. 3 companies submitted acquisition bids. Pinnacle Creative offered the most money, but had the espionage scandal hanging over them. A California firm offered decent terms, but wanted to relocate operations to Los Angeles. Apex Global offered the least money, but the best terms for employees. They guaranteed job security for all current staff and promised to maintain Denver as a regional headquarters. The board voted to accept Apex's offer. Harvey Kent called me that evening. It's done, he said. We close next Friday. What about the staff? Everyone keeps their jobs. Most will get raises to match our pay scale. We're planning to expand the Denver operation significantly. And Ronnie? Terminated immediately upon closing. No severance, no consulting contract, no transition period. The board was very clear that she's not part of the future. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. 17 years of my life ended with a vote in a conference room. There's something else, Harvey said. The board recommended you for Chief Operating Officer of the combined Denver operation. Significant salary increase, equity participation, full autonomy over operations. What did you tell them? I told them I'd discuss it with you. It's a good offer, Evan. You'd essentially be running the day-to-day business while I handle strategic oversight from the corporate office. I thought about it. A year ago, I would have jumped at the opportunity. But a year ago, I was a different person. Let me think about it. The closing was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. I arrived early, as always, and found Ronnie in her office packing personal items into cardboard boxes. She looked exhausted, defeated. The confident woman who had spat on me 3 months ago was gone, replaced by someone hollow and brittle. Help you with anything? I asked. She looked up, startled. I thought you'd be celebrating. This isn't a celebration. This is just business. Just business, she repeated. Is that what 17 years of marriage was? Just business? No. But that's what you turned it into when you decided I was expendable. She resumed packing, her movements sharp with suppressed anger. The divorce papers came yesterday, she said. Your attorney is very thorough. He's good at his job. 50-50 split of assets, no alimony, no spousal support, very clean. Very fair. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair. You destroyed my company, my reputation, my career, but the divorce settlement is fair. I didn't destroy your company. I just stopped propping it up. What's the difference? The difference is that everything I did in response to what you did first. You chose to humiliate me. You chose to cut my salary. You chose to treat me like I was worthless. I just chose to stop pretending that was acceptable. The acquisition team arrived at 9:30. Harvey Kent, 2 Apex attorneys, a representative from the board, and an accountant to handle the financial transfer. Ronnie was officially terminated at 10 o'clock sharp. Her access cards were deactivated, her company email was disabled, and her personal items were boxed up for security to escort out. She stopped at my desk on her way to the elevator. You won, she said. I hope it was worth it. This isn't about winning. This is about consequences. What are you going to do now? I'm going to do my job, same as always. She nodded once, then walked away. I watched her disappear into the elevator, carrying her cardboard boxes and what was left of her pride. At 11 o'clock, Harvey Kent called an all-hands meeting to introduce himself and explain the transition. He was professional, reassuring, and clear about his expectations. Sterling Marketing built a reputation for quality work and client service, he said. We're not here to change that. We're here to provide the resources and stability to make it even better. The applause was genuine this time. People were relieved to have clarity, stability, and a future that didn't depend on the personal dramas of their former CEO. After the meeting, Harvey pulled me aside. Have you thought about the COBOO position? I have. And I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll pass. Harvey looked surprised. May I ask why? It's a significant opportunity. It is. But I've spent 17 years cleaning up other people's messes and implementing other people's visions. I think it's time I figured out what my own vision looks like. What will you do? I'm thinking of starting my own consulting practice. Help companies improve their operations, avoid the kind of problems that brought Sterling down. Harvey nodded slowly. You'd be good at that. You certainly understand how things can go wrong. I understand how things work. Period. The going wrong part is usually a choice. Well, if you change your mind, the offer stands. I appreciate that. We shook hands, and I went back to my desk to finish the transition documentation. I ran into Tyler Blake at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning in March. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him. Still young, but less cocky, more careful. The kind of careful that comes from learning that actions have consequences. Evan, he said, stopping by my table. How are you? I'm well. You? Good. I'm working at a small agency in Boulder now. Social media management, some content creation. It's honest work. I nodded. That's good. I heard you started your own company. I did. Business consulting, it's keeping me busy. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, obviously wanting to say something, but not sure how. Look, he finally said, I know I was a complete A. The things I said, the way I acted, it was all wrong. I'm sorry. Apology accepted. I keep thinking about what happened, you know? How everything fell apart so quickly. I learned a lot about consequences. That's valuable knowledge. Have you heard anything about Ronnie? I had. She'd tried to launch a freelance marketing consultancy, but word had gotten around the industry about the Sterling Marketing collapse. Client acquisition was nearly impossible when potential customers questioned your professional judgment and management ability. Not much, I said. Tyler nodded. I tried calling her a few times after everything went down. To apologize, maybe see if we could work things out. She never called back. People process these things differently. Yeah, I guess. He hesitated again. Do you think she'll be okay? I mean, eventually. It was an interesting question. Would Ronnie be okay? She was smart, capable, and had real marketing talent. But she was also proud, stubborn, and seemed incapable of accepting responsibility for her own mistakes. She'll figure something out, I said. She usually does. Tyler thanked me for the coffee shop conversation and headed back to his car. I watched him go, thinking about second chances and the difference between consequences and punishment. My phone buzzed with a text from Harvey Kent. Apex Denver just landed the Morrison Industries account. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled and finished my coffee. The Denver Marketing Association's annual conference was held in May. I almost didn't go. My consulting practice was growing steadily and I was busy with client work. But several former Sterling colleagues had insisted I attend, so I cleared my schedule and bought a ticket. The keynote speaker was discussing industry trends when I noticed Ronnie in the audience. She was sitting in the back row, taking notes, looking professional in a navy suit I remembered from our marriage. Older, maybe a little thinner, but still the commanding presence that had attracted me 20 years ago. During the networking break, she approached me. Hello, Evan. Ronnie, how are you? Surviving. You? Doing well? The consulting practice is keeping me busy. I heard, congratulations. It's what you always should have been doing. That surprised me. Thank you. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, surrounded by industry professionals chatting about campaigns and client relationships. I've been thinking about what you said, Ronnie continued. About consequences versus punishment? Oh? You were right. Everything that happened was a consequence of choices I made. The way I treated you, the way I ran the company, the way I let my ego make decisions instead of my brain. I didn't respond immediately. This was the first time I'd heard her accept responsibility without qualification or excuse. I've been in therapy, she added, working on understanding why I needed to prove I didn't need you, why I thought humiliating you would somehow make me stronger. And what did you learn? That I was terrified of being seen as weak, of anyone thinking I succeeded because of my husband instead of my own ability. So I overcorrected and ended up destroying the partnership that was actually our strength. This was not the conversation I'd expected to have. I'm glad therapy is helping, I said. It is, slowly. She paused. I also want you to know that I understand what you did. The sabotage, the strategic intelligence to Apex, all of it. I pushed you past your breaking point, and you responded the only way that made sense. I'm not proud of how I handled it. You shouldn't be, but I'm not proud of what made it necessary either. Around us, the networking session continued. Former colleagues nodded politely when they saw us together, but kept their distance. The Sterling marketing collapse was still fresh enough to make people uncomfortable. Are you working? I asked. Freelance projects, mostly. Small campaigns for local businesses. It's humbling, but it's honest work. Building back up. Trying to. Some days are harder than others. She looked around the conference room. Being here, seeing everyone, knowing what I used to have and what I threw away. It's difficult. But you came anyway. I came because hiding doesn't change anything. I made mistakes, I paid consequences, and now I have to figure out how to move forward. I respected that. It would have been easier to stay away, to avoid the uncomfortable conversations and pitying looks. The industry has a short memory, I said. Good work speaks for itself eventually. Maybe. We'll see. She started to walk away, then turned back. Evan? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the business stuff, but for the marriage. For treating you like you were disposable. For forgetting that we were supposed to be partners. I appreciate that. Take care of yourself. You too. I watched her rejoin the conference crowd, networking with determination if not enthusiasm. She was trying to rebuild, one conversation at a time. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Mr. Miles? This is Detective Patricia Sullivan with Denver PD. I'm investigating a complaint filed by Veronica Miles regarding alleged corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. I set down my coffee and pulled out a legal pad. What can I help you with, Detective? Miss Miles claims you systematically stole confidential information from Sterling Marketing and provided it to competitors, causing significant financial damage to her business. That's an interesting accusation. What evidence is she presenting? She has documentation of suspicious account losses, employee departures that coincided with your access to personnel files, and testimony from several former employees about your unusual behavior in the months before the company's sale. I thought about this carefully. Ronnie was either desperate enough to try a Hail Mary legal strategy, or she'd found something I'd missed. Detective, I assume Miss Miles has also provided documentation of her reduction of my salary by 90% without cause, the public humiliation incident that preceded my actions, and the ethical violations that led to her removal as CEO. She mentioned a salary dispute. A salary dispute. Is that how she characterized spitting on me in front of the entire senior staff? Silence on the other end of the line. Detective, I think it would be helpful if we met in person. I have extensive documentation of the timeline and context of everything that happened at Sterling Marketing. We arranged to meet the following Monday. I spent the weekend organizing my files, the salary reduction paperwork, recordings of board meetings, documentation of Tyler's ethical violations, evidence of the Pinnacle creative espionage scheme, and a detailed timeline of events. I also called my attorney. This sounds like a desperate move, he said after reviewing the situation. She's trying to create a narrative where she's the sufferer instead of the cause of the company's problems. Can she make it stick? Doubtful. Corporate espionage requires proving that you stole trade secrets for competitive advantage. But you were married to the CEO, had legitimate access to most company information, and your actions were clearly retaliatory rather than purely competitive. Retaliatory? You were responding to workplace maltreat and constructive dismissal. That's a very different legal framework than industrial espionage. The meeting with Detective Sullivan was straightforward. I presented my documentation, explained the timeline, and answered her questions directly. So you admit to providing confidential information to Apex Global? I admit to providing strategic intelligence to a potential employer after my wife reduced my salary by 90% and publicly humiliated me in front of our staff. Why didn't you just quit? Because I wanted to ensure that her actions had appropriate consequences. Quitting would have let her avoid accountability for workplace maltreat. Detective Sullivan reviewed my documentation for over an hour. The salary reduction papers, the board meeting minutes detailing Tyler's misconduct, the security footage of the Pinnacle Creative break-in. This paints a very different picture than Miss Miles presented, she said finally. I imagine it does. Can you prove you were at home the night the Riverside presentation was stolen? I showed her my credit card records from a restaurant dinner, followed by a grocery store purchase, followed by a streaming service login from my home IP address. The access logs show someone using your credentials to download the files, someone who had access to my login information. I'd never changed my password because I trusted the people I worked with. That trust was obviously misplaced. A week later, Detective Sullivan called to inform me that the investigation was being closed without charges. Miss Miles was unable to provide evidence that your actions constituted criminal espionage rather than employment-related retaliation, she explained. And the stolen presentation materials? We're pursuing that as a separate case involving Pinnacle Creative. Your information was helpful in establishing their pattern of corporate theft. After hanging up, I sat in my home office thinking about desperation and accountability. Ronnie had spent a year rebuilding her reputation and her business, but she was still trying to make someone else responsible for her mistakes. Some people never learn. The Pinnacle Creative trial made local headlines for 3 weeks. Evidence showed they'd been systematically stealing intellectual property from competitors for over 2 years. The Sterling Apex presentation theft was just the most visible example of a broader pattern of corporate espionage. I was called to testify about the security breach and the impact on both companies. Mr. Miles, the prosecutor asked, what was your reaction when you discovered that your credentials had been used to access confidential files? I was concerned about the security implications and the potential legal liability for both Sterling, Marketing, and Apex Global. Did you suspect Pinnacle Creative immediately? No. Initially, I thought someone at Sterling was trying to frame me personally. It wasn't until we analyzed the broader pattern that Pinnacle became obvious. How did this incident affect your professional relationship with Apex Global? It complicated things. There was a period where they questioned whether I was the source of the stolen materials. Trust is essential in business relationships, and this damaged that trust temporarily. The defense attorney tried to suggest that I had orchestrated the theft myself to provide cover for my other intelligence sharing activities. Isn't it convenient, Mr. Miles, that the one theft you didn't commit was the one that could be traced back to your credentials? It would have been incredibly stupid to steal presentation materials using my own login credentials. If I were going to commit corporate espionage, I would use untraceable methods. But you admit to committing corporate espionage? I admit to providing strategic intelligence to a potential employer after being subjected to workplace maltreat and constructive dismissal. That's significantly different from stealing intellectual property for competitive advantage. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before finding Pinnacle Creative's executives guilty on multiple counts of corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy. The sentences were substantial, 3 to 5 years for the ringleaders, plus restitution to the affected companies. After the trial, Harvey Kent took me to dinner. Justice served, he said, raising his glass. Some of it. Still thinking about Sterling Marketing? Sometimes. It's strange how one moment can change everything. If Ronnie hadn't spat on me, if she'd handled her frustration differently, none of this would have happened. Do you regret it? I thought about that question. Did I regret destroying my wife's company and ending my marriage? Did I regret the calculated campaign of professional sabotage that left dozens of people unemployed and an industry damaged? I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. But I don't regret doing it. What do you mean? I mean, I regret living in a world where humiliating people has no consequences unless someone forces those consequences. I regret being married to someone who thought loyalty was weakness and respect was optional. But you don't regret fighting back? No, I don't regret fighting back. We finished dinner and went our separate ways. Harvey back to his successful company and his growing market share. Me back to my consulting practice and my carefully rebuilt life. 2 years after the Sterling marketing acquisition, I received an unexpected visitor. Tyler Blake showed up at my office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, looking older and more serious than the cocky intern I remembered. "I have something I need to tell you," he said. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What's on your mind?" "It's about the Riverside presentation, the one that got stolen." I set down my pen and gave him my full attention. "I know who took it. The Pinnacle executives were convicted. They paid for it, but they didn't steal it themselves. Someone inside Sterling gave them the files." "Who?" Tyler looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair like he was fighting with himself. "Ronnie!" The word hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "She needed money. The company was bleeding cash. The board was asking hard questions, and she knew the acquisition was coming. Pinnacle offered her $50,000 for competitive intelligence on Sterling's major projects." I stared at him, processing this information. She sold our presentation to Pinnacle, knowing they would give it to Apex. She thought it would just be corporate espionage, industrial competition. She didn't realize Pinnacle was planning to play all 3 companies against each other. "How do you know this?" "Because I helped her do it. She needed someone with computer access who wouldn't be suspected. I used your credentials because you were the obvious scapegoat if anyone investigated." The room was silent, except for the rain against the windows. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Ronnie tried to have you arrested for corporate espionage. Because she let you take the blame for something she orchestrated. Because I've spent 2 years feeling like a complete piece of crap about it." I leaned back in my chair, my mind reeling. Ronnie hadn't just been the sufferer of my sabotage campaign. She'd been actively participating in corporate espionage while accusing me of disloyalty. "Do you have proof?" Tyler pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages from 2 years ago. Screenshots of conversations between him and Ronnie discussing the file transfer, the payment from Pinnacle, and the plan to use my credentials. I saved everything. I was scared about what we were doing, so I kept records in case I needed to protect myself. "Why didn't you come forward during the Pinnacle trial?" "Because I was terrified of going to prison. And because Ronnie convinced me that you deserved it after what you'd done to the company. And now? Now I understand that what you did was retaliation for being treated like garbage. What we did was just theft." I studied Tyler's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. He seemed genuinely remorseful, but that could be an act. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just wanted you to know the truth. You've been carrying the blame for something you didn't do, and that's not right. Are you willing to go on record with this information?" "If necessary. I've already contacted the prosecutor from the Pinnacle case. If they want to reopen the investigation based on new evidence, I'll cooperate fully." After Tyler left, I sat in my office for a long time, watching the rain and thinking about truth and justice and the complexity of human motivation. Ronnie had sabotaged her own company while accusing me of sabotage. She'd stolen intellectual property while claiming to be the sufferer of theft. She'd orchestrated a scheme that damaged 3 companies while positioning herself as an innocent bystander. And she'd almost convinced the police to arrest me for her crimes. I called my attorney and filled him in on Tyler's revelation. "This changes everything," he said. "If you want to pursue charges against Miss Miles, we have a strong case for fraud, theft, and filing a false police report. What would that accomplish? Justice, accountability, legal recognition that you were the sufferer, not the perpetrator." I thought about it. Did I want to see Ronnie arrested? Did I want to drag her through another public humiliation? Did I want to spend months or years in courtrooms rehashing the worst period of my life? Let me think about it. That evening, I walked through downtown Denver, past the building where Sterling Marketing used to operate, past the restaurant where Ronnie and I had celebrated our 10th anniversary, past the coffee shop where I'd met Harvey. Kent to plan my campaign of professional revenge. The city looked different now, cleaner, somehow, more honest. I'd spent 2 years believing that I was the one who'd crossed ethical lines, who'd chosen revenge over integrity, who'd let personal grievances justify professional sabotage. But the truth was more complicated. Yes, I'd sabotaged Sterling marketing, but Ronnie had sabotaged it first, and worse. I'd been retaliating against someone who was simultaneously betraying me, her company, and her industry. I'd been fighting a war while she was committing treason. By the time I got home, I'd made my decision. I called Tyler the next morning. I've decided not to pursue charges against Ronnie. Why not? You have every right to clear your name. My name is already clear. The people who matter know what really happened. The people who don't matter aren't worth convincing. But she tried to have you arrested and failed. She's already facing the consequences of her choices. Adding legal charges won't change the fundamental truth of what happened. What truth is that? That she destroyed her own life because she couldn't handle being treated as an equal instead of a superior. That she chose ego over ethics, image over integrity, and immediate gratification over long-term success. Tyler was quiet for a moment. "You're a better person than I am," he said finally. "I'm a person who's learned to choose his battles carefully. This one is already over. I did, however, ask my attorney to document Tyler's confession officially, not for prosecution, but for the record, in case Ronnie ever tried to rewrite history again." The prosecutor from the Pinnacle case was interested in the new evidence, but understood my decision not to pursue charges. "Justice isn't always about punishment," she said. "Sometimes it's about truth." I agreed with that sentiment. 5 years after the Sterling marketing collapse, my consulting practice had grown into a small firm with 6 employees and clients across 3 states. We specialized in organizational crisis management and corporate restructuring. Companies called us when their leadership had made catastrophic mistakes, and they needed someone who understood how businesses actually fell apart. I was good at the work because I'd lived through the experience from multiple perspectives. I understood how resentment festered into sabotage, how ego-driven decisions created systemic vulnerabilities, how small betrayals escalated into total warfare. I also understood how to rebuild trust, establish accountability, and create systems that prevented personal conflicts from destroying professional relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd become successful by helping other companies avoid the mistakes that had destroyed my marriage and my wife's business. On a Thursday afternoon in October, my assistant knocked on my office door. "There's someone here to see you." "She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who is it?" "Veronica Miles." I looked up from my computer screen, surprised. I hadn't seen or spoken to Ronnie in over 3 years. "Send her in." Ronnie entered my office looking nervous but determined. She was dressed professionally but not expensively. The designer suits and jewelry were gone, replaced by business casual clothing that suggested moderate success rather than executive power. "Hello, Evan." "Ronnie." "This is unexpected. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Nothing that can't wait." "Please, sit down." She settled into the chair across from my desk, the same chair where Tyler had confessed to helping her steal the Riverside presentation. "I have a business proposition," she said. "I'm listening." "I've been building a freelance marketing consultancy for the past few years, small clients, local campaigns, nothing spectacular. But I'm good at the creative work, and I'm finally learning to be better at the business side." "Congratulations. That's not easy to rebuild from scratch." "Thank you. The thing is, I'm at the point where I need to expand or plateau. I need better systems, stronger operations, more sophisticated client management. I need the kind of expertise you've developed here." I waited for her to continue. "I'd like to hire your firm to help me restructure and scale my business." The request was so unexpected that I almost laughed. My ex-wife, whose company I'd helped destroy, wanted to hire me to rebuild her new company. "That's an interesting proposition. I know it's complicated given our history, but you're the best at what you do, and I need the best if I'm going to succeed." "Why me?" "There are other consulting firms." "Because you understand my weaknesses better than anyone. You know exactly what mistakes I'm prone to making and how to prevent them." She was right about that. "You also understand the industry, the competitive landscape, and the kind of operational excellence that builds sustainable businesses. And you're comfortable working with someone who sabotaged your previous company?" I'm comfortable working with someone who held me accountable for my actions. That's not the same thing. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but she seemed genuinely sincere. What kind of scope are we talking about? Complete organizational assessment, systems design, process optimization, strategic planning for growth, probably 6 months of intensive work. That's a significant investment. I can afford it. The freelance work has been steady, and I've been saving carefully. I considered the proposition. Working with Ronnie again would be complicated, potentially awkward, and professionally risky. If things went badly, it could damage my reputation in the industry. But it would also be an interesting challenge. Helping someone rebuild from their own mistakes, applying lessons learned from mutual destruction to create something better. I'll need to think about it. Of course. I know it's a lot to ask. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why haven't you ever publicly acknowledged what really happened with the Riverside presentation? Tyler told me about your arrangement with Pinnacle Creative. Ronnie's composure slipped for just a moment. Because acknowledging it would mean admitting that everything else was even worse than it appeared. People think I'm an incompetent CEO who lost control of my company. If they knew I was also a thief, they'd know you were desperate enough to make terrible decisions under pressure. Is that how you see it? I see it as someone who was drowning and grabbed onto anything that looked like a life preserver, even if it belonged to someone else. That's a generous interpretation. It's an accurate interpretation. The question is whether you've learned to swim or whether you're still looking for life preservers that don't belong to you. Ronnie nodded slowly. I deserve that question. Do you have an answer? Yes, I've learned to swim. It took longer than it should have, and I nearly drowned in the process. But I've learned, I believed her. Something in her voice, her posture, her willingness to ask for help instead of demanding it, suggested genuine change. I'll review your business materials and get back to you within a week, I said. Thank you. That's more than I had any right to expect. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about second chances and the difference between forgiveness and wisdom. Working with Ronnie again would be a test of everything I'd learned about separating personal history from professional judgment. It would also be an opportunity to prove that people could learn from their mistakes and build something better from the wreckage of their failures. I called Ronnie 3 days later. I've reviewed your materials and thought about your proposition. And I'm willing to take on the project with conditions. What conditions? Complete transparency about financials, operations, and decision-making. No hidden agendas, no ego-driven overrides of professional recommendations, and no personal relationship complications affecting the business relationship. Agreed. The work relationship is strictly professional. We're not trying to rebuild a marriage or a friendship. We're consultant and client. Understood. And if at any point the working relationship becomes counterproductive, either party can terminate the contract with 2 weeks' notice. That's fair. Then we have a deal. 6 months later, Ronnie's consulting firm had tripled its revenue, expanded to 12 employees, and landed its first major corporate client. The project had been professionally successful and personally educational. Working together again had taught us both how much we'd changed and how much we'd learned from our failures. We weren't friends, and we weren't enemies. We were two professionals who had shared a catastrophic past and chosen to build something constructive from the lessons it had taught us. On the final day of the consulting contract, Ronnie stopped by my office to sign the completion paperwork. Thank you, she said, for the work, obviously, but also for giving me a chance to prove I could do better. You proved that to yourself. I just provided some systems and guidance. Still, it means something that you were willing to work with me again. Business is business. Personal is personal. I've learned to keep them separate. I wish I'd learned that lesson 20 years ago. We learn when we're ready to learn. Not before. She gathered her copies of the paperwork and headed toward the door. Evan? Yes. I hope your business continues to grow. You're good at what you do. Thank you. I hope yours does too. After she left, I updated my project files and moved on to the next client, a technology startup whose founders were letting personal conflicts destroy their company's culture. Some stories repeat themselves until people learn to write different endings. I was in the business of helping them learn. The end.